There we go. So let's dive in. And Seth, is it okay if I log into the Berwick site from my side?
Absolutely. Have at it.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to share my screen and excuse me. I'm going to start totally fresh. So if it's the first time we've ever thought about, pulling data that we might want to feed to Power BI, we'll just go through some of the basic steps pretty quickly. We've documented those in a little bit more detail in a couple of these other Zoom sessions, and I can point anybody towards those recordings if anybody wants to dive a little bit deeper into some of those pieces. So let's dive in here. And I'm logged into Seth's school's site. And really the very first step in any of these type of reports is that we're going to start by building a list that contains the data that we want to pull. And the advanced list is a great way to capture a lot of that information that we can pull and then do a million things with on the Power BI side. So we've done similar sessions before where we've jumped into some of the advanced list functionality. If some of this is not totally intuitive to everybody, then you are in the vast majority. It's not the most clean thing to dive into, but once we've built a few of them, they become more and more intuitive to find the information that we're looking for. And really, kind of starting point for today is I want to pull some information around student attendance. So I'm going to start by grabbing a student record. Then I'm going to pull details around the courses that the student is enrolled in. I'll pull information around, the course title, the course block, the teacher of the course, the department that the course is, anything that I might potentially want to be able to use down the road as either, reporting features or filters within my Power BI report. I'm going to just try to get all of that information into this list just so I can have everything flow. Once I've got the basic enrollment information for students, I'm going to grab every attendance entry that's been made. So we'll focus on the current year, but once this is built, you can toggle and look backwards in time, or they're basically future-proofed at baseline. We can just toggle a couple filters to determine which year contains the information that we want to pull. So I'll pull, the date that the attendance entry occurred, what the attendance entry was, whether it was excused or unexcused, whether it's a tardy or absence. On Seth's campus, they're a K through 12. So to Seth, I honestly don't even know the answer to this, but a lot of times in the middle and upper division, attendance will be taken by period, where in lower divisions, oftentimes it's taken by day, just once a day. So we'll just gather everything that we can find, and then we'll do some exploring as we're building on the Power BI side to see how we can leverage a lot of that information. So very first thing I'm going to grab is some info about my student. So I'm going to start with my user base because that contains the student, name and address, and or enables us to pull the address and all kinds of other things. Once I've got the user base, I'm going to pull the user register entry so I can see which grade the student's in, if it's helpful for me to be able to filter by division or even just see grade levels. That user register entry contains that information. And then one more level, that user register will let me pull the division and the year, but I need to add one more node to be able to pull the student's grade level. And that's buried down here in this platform dropdown for some reason. I don't have any idea why, but it is down there. And as we're going, guys, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So please interrupt me at any point, jump in. Love to answer questions as we're going, if anyone has questions or thoughts or anything. User base, user register, grade level. Next, I'm going to pull some details around the student course enrollments. So I'm going to grab under the academic group, we'll get the course enrollment. We're going to get the course faculty, if it's helpful to know which teachers are in the classroom. We'll get the course group because that enables us to then grab the block, the course name, course abbreviation, course department. What else are we going to grab? We'll grab the course term so that we can isolate just the current year. We'll grab the academic block if it's helpful to see the block info. This course base will enable us to pull the course name. Course department is one more node to be able to grab that. And then that department just contains an ID. So if I want to know the actual name of the department, this academic department node includes that information. So really, in building this list, we're just stitching together a dozen different tables on the back end of the Blackbaud software into a structure that we can then use to output and filter the information that we'd like to see. So at this point, I've got biographical info. I've got the student enrollment with courses, and we could use the same type of thing to look at student enrollments or class sizes or historic class sizes over years. This base would give us exactly that information that we could do 100 things with. But because we're looking at attendance today, we're going to jump into the absence node, and I'm going to grab this absence marker. I'm going to say that I want that absence to be tied to the student. Oh, nope, I lied. I want it tied to the student enrollment, excuse me, because I want the absence per student per course. And then I'm going to grab this excuse type as well. And that just gives me the excused, unexcused, field trip, whatever we might have defined on the back end. And then the very last thing that I think I missed, this course faculty. Right now, again, this would give me just the teacher's ID, but if I wanted to pull a name out, I'll need to add one more user base to that course faculty section to be able to pull the teacher name or any other details from the teacher record. So I've got a lot of good information there. Oh, John, great question. Do we need academic room? Yes, let's grab that. So I did not pull that initially, but let's grab that information. Actually, does the room? Yeah, we'll grab that. Okay, excellent. So I've got all of this information. Right now, I've got inner joins everywhere, which for our purposes is just fine because really I only want to see cases where attendance information does exist. So these inners can do some funky stuff, whether they're checked or unchecked in a lot of situations. But for our purposes today, having everything checked should work perfectly. So next thing I'm going to do is build out my filter that says just a couple things where I'm going to start by saying I'm just concerned with attendance info for the current year. So we'll grab the school year. I'll say 23-24. And then also, if I want to know a student's grade level, that user register entry, it's that piece within core where you can expand it and it shows year by year, grade by grade, the student's progression through the school. So if I leave it as is now, I'll get 13 rows for a lot of these students who started at Berwick in kindergarten and left in 12th grade. I'm going to isolate it so that I'm just pulling their current grade or their grade for the 23-24 year. So I'm going to put that in as an object filter. And my user register school year, 23-24. And so my filters feel pretty solid. We may end up tweaking these a little bit more, but now I'm going to start displaying some information. So I'll grab some of the information that we may want to use in building out this report. So I'll start with, I always pull user ID. In this case, probably doesn't help us much, but maybe it will actually. We could potentially build a link from the Power BI file that will take us back into the student record. And that user ID enables us to build that direct link back into the student record if we wanted to see grades alongside the attendance that we're pulling. Under user register, we're going to grab we'll grab the grade level abbreviation. And I'll also grab the school level so that we can use those as filters. Under the course enrollment, I want to see several different things. So within the course group, I want to know which semester it was in. So we'll grab the term description. The academic block, I'm going to grab the block itself if it's helpful to analyze by block. The course base, we'll grab the title and the course code. Course department, we'll grab the department description. The room, thank you, John. I'm going to grab the building name and the room number and the room name. We'll see which one gives us the info that we're actually looking for. And then really the meat of what we're looking at today, the attendance pieces within absence, I'm going to grab the calendar date time, because that gives me both the date and the time of day that the class started. So it's 1:14 p.m. on the East Coast right now. If I wanted to look at that class that started at 1:05, I could easily isolate within the report to show who was marked absence, this period today versus just anybody who had an absence in any course today. I'll grab the excuse comment if that's in use. That's great. And then the excuse type, I'll just grab the attendance type entry here. So once I choose select, I'll have those 20 or so fields, 16 fields listed. I want to preview it just to make sure that what we're seeing makes, some sort of sense. Probably 10, 20, 30,000 entries would be my guess based on the size of Berwick and where we are in the school year. Nope, nothing. So I did something wrong. So let's start digging and see what I missed. So let's see. Course term, academic block, course faculty user base, that's fine. I'm wondering, let me just take off a couple inners.
Matt, I just wanted to note too that I think attendance of record is in advisory.
Okay.
Sorry to forget to mention that.
Nope, that's good. And that might mean that we let's get this working. I'm sorry. I had a test version. Let me just see what I've done differently here. Oh, it's my faculty. That's tied to the wrong spot. So let me just see if this gives us anything, and then we'll tie back to the faculty record as well. There we go. So now I've got some information flowing where I've got the student information. I can see the courses that the student missed, when and why they were marked as absent with comments and some of that info. Let me pull the teacher name out as well, just so we can see some of that information flowing. So in my course faculty, I just tied it to the wrong node initially. I need to tie it to the course group. And then from there, let's pull the user base tied to that course faculty member. And really, 90% of the legwork a lot of times in building these reports is simply getting a list that contains the information that we want to see in a way that makes sense to us. So now, if I preview that, there we go, perfect. So I've got some information here, and as I'm moving around, I can see, actually, let me display the teacher info as well. I'm sorry, I just put the student info out initially. So the course group, course faculty, we'll grab the teacher name. And then let's just make sure we're seeing something there. All right, excellent. Yep, so I'm seeing some teacher info. I've got some duplication here. I bet that's because this is a 3-term course. If we've got trimesters set up, it may be looking at that enrollment being tied to 3 terms. Doesn't bother me. That's part of the beauty of Power BI is we can use Power BI to eliminate the duplicate rows, and that'll just give us information that's going to be useful as we're actually working with the data. And to Seth's point about attendance of record living in the advisory section, we would actually build this list a little bit differently to gather that info from advisory, because the group type would be an advisory group as opposed to a academic group like we're seeing here. We'll pull this one out to start, and then we can come back and look at how we could tie in the advisory attendance of record info as well, alongside the period by period attendance that the teachers may be entering. So we're going to call this academic attendance 23-24. And then we're going to save that list. And then I'm going to search for it. This list ID, I don't know if you guys noticed this in the latest release of the, or not the latest, but in the last month or so, Blackbaud push this list ID down into this bottom section, which most people probably never noticed, probably never cared about, but it's critical to what we're doing here. There used to be a really sideways set of steps that we had to take to find that list ID, but Blackbaud's exposed that so that now what I like to do is just copy that ID and then bake it into the title of the list so it becomes searchable. So that in the future, if I needed to be able to work backwards from Power BI and see which list I was pulling data from, it just provides me a way to gather that information, or find that list quickly and make any edits that need to be made. So very last step here is that I need to share this list with the Web Services API Manager role. So I can give just run access, and that provides all that we need right there. So I'm going to save and exit. Because I've done work with Seth's team before, I've already done some of the back-end setup work. And again, I'll point anybody who wants more details there to the reporting that we did that outlines that in some detail. But the long and short of it is that we generally create a user record. I usually call it PBI data, where the only permissions that this user has is that they have this Web Services API Manager role assigned. They don't have a Blackbaud ID. This user could never actually log into the site. It's just the tool that we use to funnel the data through the API into Power BI. So the fact that this user exists and the fact that this user is authenticated to use the on API, this PBI data user, the fact that that's active, that combination of things is what enables us to feed the data through the API to Power BI, which I know sounds really complicated right now, but I'll point anybody towards the recording. It's about a probably 7-minute process where we can start from scratch in building that user and adding the necessary permissions to start feeding that data. So I'm going to skip that today just so we can spend more time on the fun stuff. So I've got a shell of a Power BI report up and running. Power BI, for those of you who've never seen or heard or thought of it before, is a Microsoft product, totally free to download the desktop version, which is what we're using right now. So you can build and build and build. It takes $0 investment to be able to jump in and start playing in Power BI. Microsoft starts charging a couple bucks per user per month once we get to the point of publishing these reports online, sharing with other users. On Seth's team, we've got some admissions reports that we've got what, I don't know, a half dozen-ish people who are looking at them. So I think Seth pays, maybe 20 bucks a month for those users to be able to go through the secure online portal to access the reports. But all of the building that we're doing here can be done at zero cost from Microsoft's free Power BI software. In setting this up, and again, I've got another recording where we go into this in a little bit more detail, but I want to kind of push ahead so we can see more of the building today. The first thing we would do is build a query that captures the data that we are wanting to include in this report, which in our case is that list data that we're feeding from Blackbaud into Power BI. And Seth, I hijacked the Rave version. So I'm going to get rid of a whole bunch of this stuff here. And then we'll, let me delete some steps from this query. Start from the bottom because everything will appear to be broken until we get to the point where we can start seeing some things. There we go. So at this point, I've got my list, this advanced editor tool here. And again, I'll send a link to that recording when we wrap this up as well, if anybody's interested in starting this from scratch. We've got our key and our secret that enable us to access that list ID that I copied. I'm just going to paste that right here. I've got this code snippet published out there. Anybody that wants to grab it can grab it. Just tweak a couple settings, and then you can adjust yours so that it doesn't say Berwick Academy.myschoolapp, but says whatever your domain is. And so once I've done that, I'm going to say done. And really, what this set of steps is doing is just diving into the Blackbaud database, grabbing that specific list that we've shared. And when I expand column 1 here, it's going to show me exactly the same information as I saw within the Blackbaud interface in looking at the list. So I'm going to say okay to that. And then there we are. So what we're seeing here is exactly that data as it lives in the list within Blackbaud. And noticing that, excuse me, across the board, I'm seeing duplicate entries, probably because of the term definitions within the system is the most likely culprit. But I'm just going to pretend that, I don't care about term at this point. I'm just going to tell it to remove duplicate rows, and that way I'll be left with a nice clean data set where I've got one row per student per attendance entry. And so from here, I'm going to say remove rows. And I'll just say remove duplicates. And then we should see it happen in real time where it'll tie everything together. So now for this first student, there we go. I've got one entry per student per course per day. And I can see the date on which the attendance entry occurred. So I've got all of the raw data to start doing some interesting things here. Couple things that I'm going to do this calendar date time. By default, Power BI assumes that everything that we give it is a text entry. We just need to tell it that a couple of these things are not text entries. I'll tell it that this is a date time entry so that we can do, date time things and filters with that. And I think that's the only date that we pull. There we go. So now it sees that as a date time entry. All right, that all looks good. So really now I'm just going to close and apply this, and then I can start my building. So up until now, what we've done is, build a list to go capture the data. We've set up the credentials to feed it to Power BI through the API. We've loaded that specific list into Power BI as a query, and query is just the word it uses, to describe a data set. So we basically loaded that query in as a data set that we can work with. We can see it loading, and it looks like there are 8,800 rows of attendance data that live in the current school year on the back end of the Berwick database. So now comes the fun part. And I'm sorry, I had a note from Sue Swenson here. Can you remind us what we need to purchase to create the link between Blackbaud and Power BI? Okay, great question, Sue. So Blackbaud's trying to depreciate the on API and push schools towards using the Sky API for all reporting, push developers towards using the Sky API. The on API for this type of work is infinitely cleaner to use and infinitely more powerful. So I still do almost all of my building using the on API, just because that little snippet of code, those 8-10 lines of code, let me go and gather everything from the list. And Sue's question was, what do we need to be able to make that connection? Roughly half of the schools I work with already have access to these tools, half don't. And if you do not have access to that web services API manager role, the tool is called the software developer kit, is what Blackbaud calls it. They charge, I think, $900 up front for the access, and then the ongoing maintenance is on the range of $400. It drives me nuts that they're still billing for it, because there used to be 100 different things that you could do with it, where you could actually tunnel into SQL and you could connect it to Crystal reports. They're not doing that anymore. They literally push a button and it exposes it, but they still extract their ransom to give access to these tools. So I've heard stories of people talking to their AE very nicely and just getting it unlocked, but expect to pay roughly $1,000 to get access to some of these things if you don't have them already, and you may have them already. So sorry, I see one more question in chat. Oh, there we go. Yeah, of course. So really now we've got this data here. Let's do something with it. So let's tell the system that I want to be able to group it, by student and by course. Maybe I just want to see a listing for any student. I want to see each of the courses that they have an absence in, with details around, what the date was that the student was absent and what the excuse was on that date. So as we're thinking through how we're going to build that, I'm going to start by building a field that just contains, well, actually, you know what, Seth, for our purposes, I won't expose last names. We'll do just first names, just so we're not, you know, pushing out your students' info. We'll just use the first name as the grouping tool. So I'm going to build a field that's just first name, or, you know, first name, and then I'll put the student ID at the end, just so we can differentiate all the Chloes into different Chloes. So we're going to just call this name or student name. And I'll just say it's the first name and the user ID. And then that's what I'm going to start building around. So I'm going to use this tool called a matrix in Power BI, which is really just a kind of a pre-built pivot table. And I just click on that little matrix button. It pops an empty space over here. I'm going to start pulling some information in. So I'll put that student name in, and then we'll just see that we'll see that start populating. I know that's a little bit small. Let me see if I can zoom us a bit so we can see that a little more clearly. There we go. So right now I've got just every student listed with their, you know, Blackbaud user ID right after. Next level I'd want to see is show me the classes that each of those students is enrolled in. So I want to build another layer of rows under the student name. So I'm going to grab the course title. I'm going to drag it over here. And then I'm going to tell it to expand all of this down so that for this Abigail, I can see that these are the courses that Abigail is enrolled in. And then from there, maybe I want to see some details around numbers of absences in each of those courses, or maybe number of, you know, absences of each type. How many tardies, how many excused, how many, you know, field trips, how many athletics. So I'll start building out some additional structure here. So across the top here, I'm going to put the excuse, what's it called? Let's see. Attendance type. There we go. Oh, okay. It looks like I've just pulled it as either absence or as tardy. So in theory, we could go deeper and we could grab the all of the different reasons that an absence might exist. Every school's data is going to look a little bit different there. Those are those codes that you guys have defined that your either your teachers or your administrators are able to enter within the system. And then last thing I'm going to do is have the system just give me a count of the numbers of each of those entries within that within there. So I'm going to say, just give me the calendar date time. I'll just say, give me a count. Oops. In my values here, don't show me the earliest, show me the distinct count. I'm sorry, excuse me, getting over a little virus here. But I can see, per student, per class, I can see how many absences exist for that student within each of those classes. I can do several additional things here. So maybe maybe my team just wants to be able to drill into a specific student record to see some information. So I'm going to build a little slicer, which enables me to search by the name of the student that I want to look for. And we'll kind of drag that over here. And I bet I've got a son named Jack, and it feels like there's 1,000 Jacks in school. There we go. We'll look for one of these Jacks. If I search for a student, see that I can scroll through and I can see the information just for that specific student for each of their classes. Now, if I want to go even deeper, maybe I want to see the actual days that the student was absent, or the block that the student missed. Maybe all the dentist appointments are at 9:45, so people are missing a lot of that block. And as we're building our schedule, maybe we build some more rotation in to have everything flow through the block that students miss frequently. Let's build another layer under the attendance data. I'm going to do a new column that combines the date and the maybe the excuse as well. So we'll call this, and we'll just say that equals, what did we call that? Calendar date time. And then I'll just tie together some details as well. So then I'm going to grab the excuse comment. There we go. So now I've built that field. I'm going to nest it one layer deeper. So I've got this highest level is the student name. Then I can see the individual courses that the student missed. And now I'm going to go one level deeper, and I'll be able to see all of the details around each of the students' absences. So this date excuse, I'm going to stick it right one level lower. Oh, what did I do there? That's not what I meant to do. I'm sorry. Let me get date excuse. And then I'll drill, one level further. And there I can see the student, with the details on each of those absences. So within American politics, looks like a couple college visits, and then a sick entry from the parent. The powerful part of Power BI is that we can filter, we can slice, we can dice in a million different ways. So if I wanted to find only the cases where students had a college visit recorded, we could build a search field that lets us find any college visit entries. See if some students have taken 19 college visits, maybe they're possibly abusing the system, or maybe some students have none, and that's just helpful information to know. So let's build a little search field for that as well. And actually, before I do that, maybe we're more concerned with some other things. So I'm going to build a slicer, and we'll put in that date time entry. So that calendar date time. And all right, let's take a look. Let's look at just this past week. So kids are back from break. Most of them are back from break. Who's still on a ski trip? Who's not back yet? So I can say, show me just the entries from this date range, either for that specific student or show me for all students. So I've got some travel delays for some students. So I can build these slicers, and I can choose to use, some of them at some times, others at other times. Can build different views of this information depending on who the target audience is. I could build it to show just about any details that we would want to see around the student, the course they're enrolled in, the teachers, which block they're in, what time the class was that they missed, what the excuse was, whether it was excused or unexcused, any comments that were entered by the teacher at the time that the attendance was entered, or the attendance clerk could enter that info, and we'd see it here as well. So I know that was a lot of information really quickly. Love to open it up for questions if you want to type them or scream them out. Questions, thoughts? Oh boy. All right. So from Judith, any strategy for evaluating total absences by student per course against a maximum number of allowed absences for that course? For example, in algebra, you can miss 10 per term. Biology, you can only miss 7. Can we import some table with the max number of absences allowed per course and evaluate against that and display a warning? Absolutely. So we could build on the back end, exactly as you described, Judith. We could build a table either within the system, or a lot of times what I'll do, or I'll help schools with, is build that table within a Google Sheets file, so that anybody can, with that access, could go in and tweak, what those max allowed numbers of absences are, can feed that information into Power BI through the API, just like we can pull from Blackbaud. We can also pull just as easily from Google Sheets. And then we can build layers and layers and layers of calculations within Power BI to, determine whether they're at the threshold or, 65% of the way to the threshold or, double the threshold. And then we could even filter and target based on that information. So yes, very doable. So Sue's question, if we don't have the SDK, can we just export to Excel and use it in Power BI? Absolutely. Yep. So Sue, Excel works, but Google Sheets just works a lot better. So if your school is comfortable with you dumping the info to Google Sheets, run your list, dump it to Google Sheets. The data is only as good as the last time that we exported it. But I've got several schools that don't want to bite off that cost or are just more comfortable doing the updates on some sort of a regular schedule. That dump the information to Google Sheets, and then that'll pull really cleanly out to Power BI. Vanessa's question, how do we figure out if we have the API settings? If you go into roles, see if you have the Web Services API Manager role. If that role exists, then you do have access to the tools to be able to make the direct connection and potentially automate the data pulls. All right, keep firing away with questions, but otherwise I'll keep pushing ahead until I see more popping up. Other things that I could do here. Let me jump over and we'll build a new page within this report. All right, Seth, great question. You getting ahead of me, but I want to go there in just a couple of minutes. Seth asked, can I remind the refresh interval for Power BI and for the advanced lists? So as I'm in here, anytime I want as a user of Power BI desktop, I can hit refresh. It's going to go pull that query in real time. So if 3 absences had been entered in the past 10 minutes since we plugged this in, we'd start capturing those. So within Power BI desktop, that refresh button will do that for us. When we publish this out into the Power BI service, which is part of the real power of this, if I want to distribute to other users, we can set up a scheduled refresh to occur on a regular schedule. And Seth, Microsoft limits it to up to 8 times per day, and we can do it on the hour or on the half hour. So we can choose exactly what 8 times those are throughout the course of the day. For an attendance report like this, generally I'll do it once an hour between 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock, and that'll capture everything as it's coming into the system. But you can change those settings. Some schools say, you know what, don't give me the hourly, just have it refresh overnight so I can see everything that was entered in the prior day, just so that we're not thinking that we're looking at it in real time when we may not be. And actually, let's look at that, because that's a piece that we haven't covered in any of these Zooms before, kind of how we publish this online, where we could potentially use it, and then how we could schedule those refreshes and also share access with other users who may want to see things. So again, thank you, Seth, for offering your system. Because we've got that infrastructure in place, we're able to do this pretty quickly, where if we were setting up a fresh domain, or if I was pushing this to my domain and then setting up users, just takes a little bit more time. But I think I'm logged in, Seth, as the Berwick version of myself here. Let's see. Sorry, I've got 9 windows in the way. Yep, so I'm in using a Berwick Academy email address. So I can just hit publish right here. And so I'm going to dump it into the Rave one for now, just so we don't have to set up a fresh workspace. But we can create new workspaces for the different target audiences of each of the different reports that we build. So for Seth's team, I think we've got some, admissions specific. We've got some that are admissions and finance, where we're showing revenue and average net tuition per student with filters by grade and division and new versus returning and ethnicity and 1,000 other slicers. So depending on who the target audience is, I don't necessarily dump everything into a single workspace. A lot of times it makes sense to set up a separate workspace that contains any reports that I want those users to be able to see. So I'm going to put it into this Rave integration. This is a fun little emergency contact one Seth and I have been grinding through for a month or so. And this act of publishing just pushes it out so that it will be available through a browser based interface, and my end users can interact with it through the web so that they don't have to have this Power BI desktop software. Couple more little quirks about Power BI. Being a Microsoft product, it can only run on a Windows machine. So for schools that are heavily Mac or entirely Mac, you need to have a computer that can run Power BI to be able to do a lot of this building. But once it's built and it's published online, any user on any device in any browser is able to get to it. So I could get to this as easily through my phone as I could through my Windows machine, as I could through the Mac that's sitting right over here. And a lot of schools, I've got several of my clients are on this call as well. A lot of schools just say, hey, Matt, go build it. Tell me when it's done. Tell me how to get to it. And then don't think about a lot of these steps that we're looking at here. And I'm thrilled to do that as well. So please reach out if there's anything I can help with. So if this is scary or intimidating, great. I'm thrilled to do it. If it's not and you want to dive in, fantastic. I'd be thrilled to kind of walk you through the steps on getting started and getting the data flowing. But now that we have published that, I'm going to actually log in. So Seth's team uses Google to manage their user logins. Oops. So I need to go to an incognito tab just so I can log into my Berwick email, and then I can side door into Power BI. So yep, is it .org? There we go. Okay, so now I'm logged into my Berwick email. And then from there, I'm going to log into Power BI, and it should authenticate me or let me authenticate because I'm logged into the browser already. Oops. And then sure, we'll say stay signed in. So now I'm going to go into my workspaces. I published it to this Rave integration spot, and Seth, we can clean this thing up and shift it to somewhere more useful for your team. But we're going to jump into this Berwick attendance report, and it will look identical to what we saw in Power BI desktop, but it's just a web-based version. So we can see that I'm in the Chrome browser now, but I've still got all of the same controls. So if I wanted to look at a specific student, and if I wanted to clear my date filters, then I can dive in and do all of the same interactions as I could in Power BI desktop. So just pulling a lot of information through, and then the end users can still interact with it just as cleanly without having to have the Windows machine or the Power BI desktop software. Could have renamed the pages, could make this thing a lot prettier, throw some logos up top, put some links back to the student record, can even feed a student photo through so that as we're looking at the student could see who we're physically looking at. It'll pull the data or pull the photo from the Blackbaud database. But what I wanted to look at here were a couple things. So first, in scheduling the refresh from the workspace here, notice that I've got this data file itself that's got I don't even know what that's supposed to be. It looks like some little domino. And then I've got the actual report file tied to Berwick attendance. This data file is what I would need to schedule the refresh to run on. So it's going to go grab fresh data as frequently as I tell it to do it. I'm going to click on this schedule refresh button. And then from here, the very first time I do this, I need to tell it something about the data source credentials. So in here, I'm just going to say edit credentials. I'm going to leave those settings exactly as they are, and I'll just say sign in. So because we've baked the key and the secret into the query itself, it's not authenticating every time that we log in. I think the real power of this through the on API is I've baked those credentials into the query, but the only data that could potentially flow through is the specific list that's been shared with the user who those credentials apply to. So it provides a nice clean layer of security, but it also ensures that we don't have to save our Google credentials in Microsoft's domain every time we want to refresh the data to feed something in. So I've updated the credentials, and then at this point, this refresh button down at the bottom, I can define a refresh schedule to import the data. So I'm going to turn that on. We can choose either daily or weekly. Generally, I'll choose daily. And then I can add some times. So I'll say, you know what, do this at 7 in the morning, just so we get everything that occurred yesterday to flow through. And then we could do hourly throughout the day, or in this case, I'll just say, give me a 2 p.m. I'll apply it. And then, a couple times a day in the background, nobody has to look at it or think about it, but in the background, Power BI is going to go grab that list from Blackbaud and then rebuild this report with, whatever information is in that list at the time that we pull it. So, I've worked with some schools that say we reset attendance at the semester. We don't care about the full year. If we were to tweak the list within Blackbaud and say, only show me dates, between a certain range, it'll eliminate everything from prior dates without us having to do anything to the Power BI file. Just by simply making that tweak within the Blackbaud list, it enables us to control that information a little bit more cleanly. So then if I go back into this report, it's been scheduled to refresh in 10 minutes. If I want to share this with other users on my campus, I've got the ability up here to share. And I'm going to share this one with Seth. So I can send a link to SHERD. I'll say, oops, let's get some grammar correct there. And then I'm going to send it. And then what that means is that Seth is also now able to access this same report. So I built it on Power BI desktop on my machine in South Carolina. I published it out to Microsoft's Power BI online workspace. Now that I've shared it with Seth, he'll see that multiple times a day updated data, be able to click in and see and interact with it from wherever he is. So with Berwick Academy, we have a separate, Berwick domain that we've tied everything to. I also work with several schools where I tie everything to my own domain and I can just give them access to that directly. So, you don't necessarily need to give me an email address on your domain. It opens some possibilities for kind of workspace management, user management. I can help a little bit more with some back-end things where that's the case. But most of my schools that I work with, I just keep it in my domain and then I share their access through the workspace itself. There was a question, I think I saw a question. Sorry, I'm looking for my Zoom controls here. Looker Studio. So Kyle, great question. I have not done similar things with Looker just because I started in Power BI 7-8 years ago, and I'm just really comfortable there. Also, the query that we built is almost idiot proof, where all I do is swap out that list ID and then I can grab data over and over and over and over and over again. I'm certain it could be done in Looker. I just don't have that data connection built to automate the refreshes from Blackbaud to a spot where we could then feed it to Looker. But if you can get it into a Google Sheet, then in theory, you could do exactly the same type of information or same type of thing within Google Studio. I was at the Blackbaud conference in Denver a couple months ago and chatted with Graham Getty. I don't know if any of you guys know Graham or have heard Graham's name, but he's at St. Albans School in DC. He's done some really cool stuff with automating data from Blackbaud to Google Sheets directly. I need to hop on a Zoom with him and just kind of see what his steps are so I can try to replicate it. I just haven't yet. But to answer that question, in theory, it should be totally possible to do a lot of the same types of things through the Looker Studio interface. I know we kind of rushed through a lot there. I just wanted to make sure that we covered this part about publishing to the web, because I don't think I have covered that in a previous Zoom. But any other questions or thoughts or specific data points that might be interesting that you can think of offhand? No. Okay. Well, we can just wrap it up here then. But this is not pretty at this point, but with a little bit of polish, we can do a million different things with it, and we can build, quick counts per student or per course or per teacher or 1,000 different things. But really, the hardest part is getting started and just getting that data into the list in Blackbaud, and then getting it to flow to Power BI, and then it's unlimited what we can do with it. This time of year, I'm spending 90% of my time building these types of reports around enrollment contracts. So, in process contracts, signed contracts, aid that was offered, but students declined the offer of aid and enrolled elsewhere. What came back into my financial aid bucket. It's just the time of year where a lot of that type of thing is happening. But at different times of year, I'm spending time all over the place. I'd be thrilled to connect with anybody who wants to, jump in, do some work together, dive deeper, or always happy just to hop on a Zoom to help you get started and just see if any of this would be useful from your end. So please reach out if there's anything I can do to help. And hope you guys have a great afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Seth.